My name is Daniel, and for most of my life I thought being dependable was the same thing as being okay. I lived in a small apartment above a hardware store and worked long days managing deliveries for a construction supplier outside town. Nothing about my life looked broken from the outside. Bills got paid. Messages got answered eventually. I showed up on time. I remembered birthdays even when nobody remembered mine. Life was simple. Or maybe it only looked simple because I stopped expecting anything from it. Most mornings started the same way. Coffee too hot to drink immediately. Quiet kitchen, phone face down. 10 minutes sitting at the edge of the bed before convincing myself to stand up. I told myself everyone felt tired. I told myself everyone drifted away from people after 30. I told myself I was busy. Those explanations worked because nobody questioned them. Not even me. That Thursday had already been longer than usual before the rain started. A shipment had arrived late. One driver quit in the middle of the day. My manager spent 4 hours pretending stress was leadership. By the time I locked up and walked outside, my shirt felt heavy and my head felt louder than the street. I sat in my truck for a while without starting it. I checked my phone. 3 unread messages. 1 from my sister, 1 from work, 1 from my landlord. The first 2 could wait. The third couldn't. Short version. Pipe burst. Apartment flooded. Temporary access unavailable. Sorry. I stared at the message longer than necessary. Not because losing the apartment was catastrophic. Mostly because I realized there wasn't anyone obvious to call. I had coworkers. People I knew. Numbers in my contacts. But there was nobody I could text without first apologizing for existing. That thought bothered me more than the flooded apartment. I started driving anyway. Rain got heavier. The windshield blurred into moving light and gray shapes. I pulled into a gas station and sat there again. I considered a motel. Every place nearby was either full or expensive enough to feel irresponsible. I thought about sleeping in the truck. I almost laughed. 31 years old. Reliable. Responsible. Sleeping in a parking lot because I couldn't think of a single door to knock on. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A woman said my name carefully, like she wanted to make sure she had the right person. I recognized her voice a second later. Maya. We weren't friends. Not exactly. A few months earlier, I'd helped her move a bookshelf after a neighbor asked for volunteers. Since then we'd crossed paths occasionally. Small conversations. Nothing memorable. She said she got my number from the neighborhood group. She heard about the apartment. She asked if I had somewhere to stay. I said yes too quickly. She was quiet for a second. Then she asked again. Do you actually? I looked out at the rain. No, I said. She said, you can stay here tonight. Like she was offering an umbrella. No hesitation. No performance. Just a practical solution. I told her she didn't have to do that. She said she knew. Then she gave me the address. Her place sat on a quiet street lined with old trees and houses that looked repaired instead of renovated. The porch light was on. She opened the door before I knocked. Gray sweatshirt. Hair tied back. No makeup. Tired eyes. Warm expression. She looked exactly like someone who lived her actual life instead of arranging it. You found it, she said. I nodded. She stepped aside. Come in. The house wasn't big, but it felt complete. There were books stacked unevenly. A folded blanket over the couch. Shoes near the door. A mug left in the sink. Nothing matched. Everything belonged. She took my wet jacket and handed me a towel. Couch pulls out, she said. Bathrooms down the hall. Tea. I said I didn't want to inconvenience her. She looked at me for a second. Then she smiled. You say that like it's your job? I didn't answer. She made tea anyway. The kitchen light stayed off. Only a warm lamp in the corner lit the room. Not bright. Just enough. We sat with our cups, rain tapping against the windows. She asked normal questions. Work, family. How long I'd been in town. I answered automatically. Short versions. Edited versions. At one point she asked if I liked living alone. I said I was used to it. She nodded like she'd heard something different. Hours passed without effort. No awkward silence. No pressure. Just room. Eventually she stood and showed me where extra blankets were. Then she stopped in the doorway and looked back. Her voice stayed gentle. But the question didn't. Do you always leave before people can ask you to stay? I looked at her. She didn't look embarrassed. She didn't look curious. She looked like someone asking if I was cold. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. She nodded once. Good night, Daniel. She turned off the kitchen light. The lamp stayed on. I lay awake on the couch staring at that warm corner of the room. And somewhere between the rain and the silence, I realized nobody had asked me something that honest in years. The next morning I woke up already thinking about leaving. Before I stood up. Before coffee. Before she even woke up. Because that's what I did. Stay briefly. Take up little space. Disappear politely. I folded the blanket, put the pillow back, reached for my jacket. Then I heard her voice from the kitchen. Morning. There was coffee. Toast. And that same lamp still glowing softly. She looked over her shoulder and said casually, "You don't have to rush out." I stood there holding my jacket, and for reasons I couldn't explain. That simple sentence felt less like permission and more like something I hadn't realized I needed to hear yet. I should have left that morning. That was the plan. Coffee, thank her, find a motel, figure things out, return to being someone who needed very little from anyone. Instead, she asked if I could help her move a table into the spare room. Not because she couldn't do it. Not dramatically. Just casually. Like people asked each other for things. So I stayed another 20 minutes. The table was old and heavier than it looked. We angled it through a doorway twice before getting it in place. She laughed once and said the house had opinions. I laughed too. It surprised both of us. After that, she asked if I wanted breakfast. I said I should probably go. She nodded and handed me another cup of coffee. No pressure, no invitation, just no urgency. By noon, my landlord confirmed repairs would take several days. I stared at the message. Maya looked up from her laptop at the kitchen table. Bad news. Few days, I said. She thought for a moment. Then she said, "Well, the couch isn't filing complaints." I started to refuse. She interrupted. "Only if you want to." That part mattered more than I expected. Nobody was rescuing me. Nobody was collecting favors. She was simply making space. So I stayed. The first day passed strangely easily. She worked remotely. I answered emails and calls. Around lunch, I fixed a cabinet door that had started leaning. She noticed immediately. "You don't sit still well," she said. I shrugged. She asked if I always fixed things in places that weren't mine. I said sometimes fixing things felt easier than deciding things. She looked at me for a second. Then she said she understood. She didn't explain. That became our rhythm. She never demanded explanations. But she never ignored things either. The next morning, I woke up before her and made coffee. When she came into the kitchen, she stopped and looked around. "You know where everything is already." I told her kitchens made sense. People didn't always. She smiled. That answer stayed in the room longer than I wanted. Days settled into small routines. Nothing that should have mattered. Morning coffee. Separate work. Shared lunches. Quick grocery runs. Short conversations in doorways. But routines are strange. You don't notice them becoming important until missing one feels disappointing. One afternoon, we went to buy groceries because her refrigerator had almost nothing inside except eggs, mustard, and an unreasonable number of lemons. At checkout, she looked at my basket and laughed. "You buy like weather might stop existing." I looked down. Canned soup, rice, bread. Too much of everything. I shrugged. She didn't tease me. She just said, "You plan for things." I said somebody shilled. She pushed the cart outside quietly. Later that evening, she cooked. Nothing complicated. Pasta, garlic, too much pepper. I offered to clean. She said okay immediately. No arguing, no pretending. That surprised me too. People usually refused help before accepting it. She simply treated contribution as normal. That night, rain started again. Not heavy. Just enough to soften the windows. She asked if I wanted tea. We sat in the living room. Only the lamp was on. Same warm corner. Same quiet. I finally asked why she always used that lamp instead of the ceiling light. She looked at it for a moment. Then she said overhead lights made rooms feel temporary. The lamp made the room feel occupied. I didn't know what to say. So I nodded. She asked me something small after that. "What did you want to be before life happened?" Nobody had asked me that in years. I almost gave the safe answer. Instead, I told the truth. I used to want to build furniture, not as a job, just because I liked making useful things. She smiled. That tracks. I asked what that meant. She said, "You seem like someone who wants things to stay standing." That sentence followed me for hours. Over the next few days, conversations became easier. She told me she moved there after deciding she was tired of living her life around other people's expectations. I didn't ask for details. She didn't offer them. But I noticed things. Boxes still unpacked. A shelf with missing photos. Moments where she stared out windows slightly too long. One afternoon, she found me tightening a loose handle in the bathroom. She leaned against the door. "You don't have to earn being here." I looked at her. She looked away first. I said I know. But the truth was I didn't. Not completely. That evening, we ate leftovers at the counter. She told a terrible story about accidentally attending the wrong community meeting. I laughed harder than the story deserved. She noticed. Didn't mention it. Just smiled. Later, we sat with tea again. The lamp between us. Rain outside. Nothing dramatic. Nothing changing. And somehow everything changing. She looked over and asked quietly, "I thought you'd leave days ago." I looked at my cup. Then at the room. Then at her. And for the first time in longer than I wanted to admit, I realized I hadn't once spent the day waiting to be alone. That scared me. Because I still didn't know if I was staying. But I suddenly knew I didn't want to leave. She didn't say anything after that. She just reached over, turned the lamp a little brighter, and said, "Then don't decide tonight. We'll figure out tomorrow when it gets here." The strange thing about comfort is that you don't notice when it becomes important. At first, staying at Maya's house had felt temporary. Then practical. Then familiar. And somewhere in between, without permission or announcement, it started feeling dangerous. Not because anything was wrong. Because things were becoming right. That week my landlord called. Repairs were finished. Apartment ready. You can move back anytime. I thanked him. Hung up, stared at the wall for a while. Maya was in the kitchen cutting vegetables. She looked over. "Good news." I nodded. "Apartment's ready." She smiled immediately. "That's great." And she meant it. That should have made things easier. Instead, something uncomfortable opened in my chest. Because her reaction carried no expectation. No disappointment. No hidden question. She wasn't asking me to stay. Which meant leaving would be simple. Simple should have felt good, it didn't. The rest of the day moved normally. Too normally. She asked if I wanted tea. I said maybe later. She asked if I wanted to help make dinner. I said I had emails. Nothing dramatic, just small distances. That night she left the lamp on and went to bed early. I stayed awake longer than usual. I told myself this was normal. People returned home. Temporary situations ended. You thanked people. You moved on. That was healthy. That was adult. So why did it feel like abandoning something? The next morning I woke up determined to reset. I packed slowly. Folded clothes, charged devices. Organized things that didn't need organizing. Maya noticed. She didn't ask questions. She just moved around me politely. That bothered me more than if she had asked. At lunch she said she was going out for a while. I asked where. She looked surprised. Community center. Need to drop something off. Then she smiled. I'll be back. The house felt different after she left. Same couch, same kitchen, same lamp. But everything suddenly looked like somebody else's life. I realized I had memorized things. The sound of the front door. Which cabinet held mugs. Where she stood while waiting for water to boil. I sat there longer than necessary. Then I noticed a small storage box under a side table. Half open. Not hidden. Inside were old photographs. I shouldn't have looked. But one photo had slipped partly out. A younger version of Maya stood beside an older woman. Same eyes. Same smile. On the back someone had written "Leave one light on." I put the photo back immediately. When Maya returned, she found me making coffee. She looked tired. I almost told her I was leaving tomorrow. Instead I asked something else. "Why do you always leave the lamp on?" She stopped. Not dramatically, just enough. She set her keys down. Thought for a second. Then sat. When she spoke her voice stayed calm. After my mom died, I moved into a quiet apartment. First few weeks I kept thinking I'd hear someone moving around. Eventually silence became too loud. So I started leaving one lamp on. Stupid habit. I shook my head. She smiled a little. Not stupid. She looked at me. Then said something that stayed with me. Empty rooms convince you nobody would notice if you disappeared. Light helps. Neither of us spoke after that. Dinner happened quietly. Later she went to read. I stayed in the living room, thinking. Not about her. Not exactly. About myself. About how many years I'd spent building a life nobody could interrupt. Working. Managing. Showing up. Leaving early. Never asking for help. Never staying long enough to become expected. I remembered birthdays. Helped people move. Covered shifts. Fixed shelves. Then went home. No one could disappoint you if nobody relied on you. No one could leave if nobody stayed. I sat there and realized I didn't know whether that had protected me. Or erased me. Over the next 2 days I became quieter. Not intentionally. But enough. Maya noticed. She stopped asking if I wanted tea. Stopped waiting for dinner. Stopped making space, not cold. Just careful. That hurt more than anger would have. One evening she found me standing near the door. Bag packed. Keys in hand. She looked once. Leaving tomorrow. I nodded. She said okay. Nothing else. Then she walked past me. Turned on the lamp. And sat down. Something inside me reacted immediately. I put my bag down. She didn't look up. I said quietly. "You're not gonna ask me to stay." She looked surprised. Then she smiled a little. "No." I looked at her. "Why not?" She thought for a second. Then said. "Because people don't stay when they feel responsible. They stay when they want to." The room became very quiet. I looked at the door. Then the lamp. Then her. And suddenly I understood the question she asked me that first night. Do you always leave before people can ask you to stay? Because if they never asked, you never had to find out whether they wanted you. I picked up my bag, walked to the door, stopped. The lamp was already on. And for the first time in years, leaving didn't feel safe. It felt lonely. I stood by the door longer than made sense. Bag in my hand, keys in my pocket. Lamp glowing behind me. Nobody said anything. Maya stayed where she was, reading. Or pretending to. She didn't look up. She didn't ask again. And that was the problem. If she had asked me to stay, maybe I could have blamed her. Called it comfort. Called it timing. Called it temporary. But she wasn't asking. She was letting me choose. I looked at the door. Then at the room. Then at her. And suddenly I realized something embarrassing. I didn't want to go back to my apartment. Not because the apartment was bad. Because nothing waited for me there. No lamp. No second cup. No one saying good morning from another room. No one noticing whether I came home. The thought sat heavily in my chest. I put my bag down. Not dramatically. Just quietly. Maya turned a page. I stood there another few seconds. Then I sat on the other end of the couch. She looked over. Didn't smile. Didn't react. Just waited. I looked at the lamp. Then I said, "You asked me something the first night." She closed the book. I kept looking ahead. "You asked if I always leave before people can ask me to stay." She nodded once. I took a breath. Then another. I wasn't good at saying things directly. Still not. But some things stop sounding true if you keep avoiding them. So I said, "Usually." Her expression softened a little. I kept going. "I leave early. I don't ask for much. I don't stay too long. I make things easy. I tell myself that's consideration. But maybe I just don't like finding out whether people actually want me around." The room stayed quiet. Rain had started again. Soft. Like the first night. Maya rested her hands together. Then she asked, "How long have you been doing that?" I laughed once. Not because it was funny. I thought for a second. Long enough that it feels normal. She nodded slowly. Then she looked at the lamp. I thought so. I looked at her. That surprised me. She noticed. She smiled slightly. "Daniel. People who don't expect to stay always fold blankets too neatly." That made me laugh. Actual laughter. Short, quiet, but real. Then she said, "You know what I noticed the second day?" I looked over. "You fixed things. You cleaned things. You brought coffee. You always contributed. But you never once acted like you belonged anywhere." That one hurt. Not because she was wrong. Because she wasn't. I leaned back. Looked at the ceiling. Then said something I hadn't planned. "I didn't want to become a burden." She looked confused. "Who taught you that staying means becoming a burden?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because I didn't know. Maybe nobody. Maybe life. Maybe years of becoming useful instead of known. She sat quietly. Then said, "You know what I think?" I looked over. "I think you're so busy leaving politely. You forgot that people sometimes like having you there." That sentence settled somewhere deep. Not dramatic. Not life-changing in the movie sense. Just painfully true. We sat quietly for a while. Then she stood. Walked into the kitchen. I heard cabinets open. A minute later she came back carrying 2 mugs tea. She handed one to me. Sat down again. Like nothing important had happened. That felt important somehow. After a while she said, "So what's the plan?" I looked at her. She shrugged. "Apartment. Life. Unknown future," I thought. Then smiled a little. "I should probably move back." She nodded. "Makes sense." I took a sip. Then added, "But maybe not tonight." She looked at me. Not surprised. Just warm. "Okay." That was all. No speeches. No hidden meaning. Just okay. The next morning I didn't rush. We had breakfast. Talked about groceries. I moved some things back to my apartment later that week. Not all. Just enough. Some evenings I stayed there. Some evenings I came back. At some point nobody discussed it anymore. Life stopped feeling divided. A few weeks later I came over after work. Used my own key. Walked inside. The lamp was on. Maya was in the kitchen. She looked up. "You're late." I said, "Traffic." She nodded. Then asked, "Can you help me fix that shelf tomorrow?" I smiled. "Yeah, I can do that." She went back to cooking. I stood there for a second. Watching ordinary things happen. And I realized something. Nothing dramatic had changed. There were no promises. No labels. No declarations. Just space. And someone who left the light on. Later that night we sat in the living room. Rain outside. 2 cups. Same couch. Same lamp. She looked at her book. I looked at nothing. And neither of us said goodnight first.